How do you like my new Exorcist hoodie? I love these colors. Purple. It's my favorite color. So in a previous video, I did a reading roundup where I talked about a book called Where the Dead Wait by Wilkes. And I said I would make a new video that went into more depth with it and even had spoilers. And here's that video. So here's your spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about things that are detrimental to the plot of Where the Dead Wait by Wilkes. So if you do not want to know about all the big spoilers, all the big plot points and everything like that happen in this book, you might want to just not watch this video because, yeah, I'm going to be talking about all the stuff. Also, if you watch that video, there's definitely going to be some things I'm going to be repeating in here. So pretty much anything I talked about in that video, I'm going to also talk about here. I'm going to act like this is the first time saying everything, so that way if there are people that hadn't watched that video, they got all the information all here, if that makes any sense. I apologize if you watch that video. You're going to be hearing some repeat stuff. Yeah, let's just jump right in. I talked about this book. How it started out good, had good prose. The premise sounded really good, because the way that the blurb made it sound, it was like this gothic polar horror, like a gothic Arctic exploration horror novel. And it sounded like there was supernatural stuff going on, from at least the way the blurb was talking, you know what I mean? Which, that's one thing I do have a problem with a lot of blurbs, whether it's for movies or books. A lot of times there are, I don't know if it's the editors that make the blurbs or if it's the publishers or whoever, but there's just so many times where I don't know if they try to give you false expectations or if they just really do not know the story that well, or they just do not know how to summarize a story well. But there's so many times where if you read the blurb, you kind of get an idea of how a story's going to be, and it's like, that was nothing like that. Why did you write it like that? Same vein goes for movie trailers, and why I hate movie trailers and don't watch them if I can help it, because they'll give you, a lot of times they just misrepresent the vibe of the movie. Will either give you too much information about the plot, so things are actually spoiled just about, or they don't give you any information at all. It's like there's never anything in between for movie trailers, I fucking swear. And a lot of times they'll give you the best scenes, especially if it's a comedy. They usually give you the funniest scenes, and there's so many comedies where it's like, oh man, from the trailer it sounds funny. Well, it's because the only good scenes were in the trailer, and everything else isn't even funny, so I wasted an hour and a half of my time with that. I had read The Terror by Dan Simmons before reading this book, so the idea of reading a different take on the Arctic expedition horror really intrigued me, but it really does not do anything different at all. And I realized that I didn't actually finish what I was saying before, but it bills it as a gothic horror. There's no goth in it. There's no gothic in it. I don't understand why they would even try to call it gothic. There's literally nothing about it at all. I mean, I guess maybe they think that they've got some tropes of, like, there's the wife of the person that they're trying to find is a psychic medium or a I can't remember exactly what they call it in the book, but that's basically what it is. She claims that she can speak to the dead and everything like that, and she holds these seances. Seances are something that happen in a lot of gothic stories, but it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of things that happen in gothic stories that doesn't mean something's a gothic story just because that's in it. There's a lot of murder mystery novels that have, you know, lavish mansions, or even like gothic style mansions. That doesn't mean it's a gothic murder mystery, you know what I mean? Medieval stories will often take place in a castle, especially if they're about knights and stuff like that. Doesn't mean it's gothic just because a lot of gothic things happen to take place in castles. You know what I mean? So, and maybe some of the tropes too of like the main character being haunted by like these visions and emotions But again, it does not do it in a gothic way. It just does it in a way that makes that character feel like a weak character. I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So because I guess I'm assuming that if you're watching this video that has spoilers, that you might have already read this book. But maybe you haven't. And maybe you know you're never going to read this book, but you want to know why I don't like this book, I guess. I don't know. So the premise is there was an expedition to find the North Polar Sea, I believe, or the Open Polar Sea, or however the heck it was called. And they end up getting icebound, so they couldn't move in the ship, so they end up having to leave the ship, go on to land, which is just a snowscape, barren hellhole. Every once in a while they find an animal to hunt and eat, but not very often. They don't come across any natives or any other humans in like the 3 years that they're stranded. They run out of rations and end up having to resort to cannibalism whenever somebody dies, and a lot of them die from scurvy. You know, it's stuff that you've heard in every survival gone wrong scenario. You know what I mean? Especially Arctic, but I mean also others. You know, you got the Donner Party. You know, you've got plane crashes that happens. You know what I mean? It's not just in Arctic expeditions. But they end up getting rescued, and one of the people, which is Stevens, I think he's the lieutenant or something like that, he gets left behind because he was on a hunting excursion, and nobody thought, hey, maybe we should wait for him, even though the main character, Captain Day, is like obsessed with him. You know, he's in love with him, and doesn't think like, oh, maybe we should wait for him. Like it's never said why they left him there, like why they didn't wait for him or anything like that. It was just like, all right, everybody get in here and let's just go. And nobody was just like, oh, we got somebody that's trying to get us food. Like, I don't get that. But whatever. And then like 13 years after they get back, like Day has been trying to get, you know, the ability to go back to try to find him, and finally gets the opportunity, because he's basically shunned when he gets back, because he had to resort to cannibalism to survive, even though like people say like, oh yeah, that happened to like these people too, and like nobody's ostracizing them for it, but apparently everybody thinks that Day's a piece of shit for it. Not the rest of his crew that also had to resort to cannibalism, just Day, I guess. And like they even go so far as like to question like stuff that happened, and it's like, why is it, you know, as far as I know, in the real life thing, the real life story of the Endurance ship, when I think some people survived that one, right? And it's been a long time since I've read the book about it by the book by Alfred Lansing, which is a non-fiction book. It's not a fictional story about Arctic exploration. It's a real one, and I do recommend that one. I do remember really liking it, and I really want to reread it at some point. Reading Where the Dead Wait just made me want to reread that and reread The Terror by Dan Simmons, because it's like those two are so much better than this book. But if I remember, there was nobody was just like, oh, how dare you have done stuff to survive when they came back. So I don't get why was Day ostracized so much. Like, it's, and even then it's those things, it's that thing where the author mentions that it happened, but it doesn't actually show. It just keeps on saying, yeah, Day was ostracized all the time, and you know, it frustrated him. I don't know. It probably could have shown us more of that in a way, maybe. So the Admiralty that he works, that he's part of, basically shuns him and effectively just pretends like he's not even a ranking officer anymore, and nobody wants to give him an expedition to go back to find Stevens until apparently Stevens' wife finally somehow gets someone to do it, and she requests that Captain Day be the captain again. He wasn't originally the captain of the first expedition, but when the captain died of scurvy, he was the next ranking officer, so he automatically became the captain. And even then, like, he is a weak fucking man. Apparently, he works for the Admiralty or the Navy or whatever like that, and is supposed to have gone through all this training and stuff like that. And yeah, he acts like he has no fucking clue how a boat works or anything really. And it's like at first in the book, you just think like, oh, you know, he's just maybe like more humble or something like that. But like the more you go on, it's like, oh no, this guy just doesn't know how to do anything or make a decision or, you know, exist. Whatever. He gets his crew together, or he's given a crew to go back and find Stevens, and you know, he's just like, oh man, thank God, you know, I've been wanting to find Stevens. Ever since he got back, he's basically been hallucinating Stevens being around him, or even like interacting with him and stuff like that. And so he believes that he's got this psychic connection to Stevens or whatever. It ends up being one of those really stupid cliches that happen in a lot of, especially movies and TV shows, where when somebody's essentially grieving somebody, they keep seeing them everywhere. You know, this was done in Scrubs, even. Like, non-horror stuff does this all the time. The Scrubs TV show did this. Same with House. It's happened in House. This happened in Supernatural. This happened in, like, every fucking thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's so tired. Like, why would you do this? And I think the reason why the author did this, because the author was trying to make it be like, oh, is it a ghost, or is he just imagining him? You know what I mean? And it's not the only instance where the author tries to make you think there's supernatural stuff going on when there's no supernatural stuff going on. So what's the point? I get if you're going to do, like, Turn of the Screw or Haunting of Hill House, where you keep it ambiguous even at the end, where people to this day are still discussing whether or not they think there's actually paranormal happenings in those stories or not, and everybody seems to have a different opinion on it. If you're going to do that, maybe. But when nothing actually happens at all that's supernatural, and every time you try to make the readers think that there's something supernatural going on, you normally soon after show that it wasn't supernatural. It's stupid. It's like in horror movies when there's a what I call a fake out jump scare, when a character has like a hand grab them out of nowhere and they freak out because they think it's the monster or the villain trying to get her, and it's just someone that she knows, like, are you okay? And it's like, okay, it's fucking stupid. For one thing, your character's a dumbass if he thinks, oh, I'm going to check on this person, so I'm going to sneak up on them and grab them real quick. Grab them real quick. It's just cheap ways to try to add horror where there's no horror. And that's a big theme in this book, because it's trying to be a survival horror, and it's really just a survival book, a survival adventure book. And it honestly might have actually been a lot better of a book if she just kept it that way, just survival, you know? But instead, she's trying so hard to make you think there might be supernatural stuff, and then turn around and be like, yeah, that wasn't supernatural. And she tries really hard to make you think that all the instances of cannibalism are like the most crazy, mind-blowing things ever happen, and like that's so horrible, that's so like horrific that like they had to resort to cannibalism to stay alive. It's like, fucking Yellow Jackets did that, and the Yellow Jackets wasn't even a horror show. I haven't actually seen all of Yellow Jackets, but I do know that happens in it. So, like, doesn't that happen in Lord of the Flies? I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've read Lord of the Flies. I really need to reread that, but yeah, like, whenever she's trying to make things like disturbing, she just keeps going back to like the same instances of cannibalism from the first expedition, and it's like, we fucking get it. Like one of the things that happens in the book is that she keeps on going back and forth between the original expedition and the current expedition, like the original one and the rescue one. And see, that wouldn't be bad if there was a point to that. Say we're focusing on the current expedition and something happens where we go back and we learn more about the original expedition that will relate to what just happened in the current time. And that does happen very rarely in this book. There are a few times where when she goes back and explains more stuff that happened in the original expedition, there's actually a reason for that that relates to the current expedition. It would also be a lot better, or would make a lot more sense to do that jump back and forth if every time we went back, we revealed more about what happened before to kind of, build more suspense. And again, that does happen very rarely. Usually, though, we're going back to the same event of Shepard and his trial. And almost every time we go back to that trial, it's basically the same thing each time, and with barely any more details added to it. Except for like the last time where all the details that were omitted before are added to it, but it's still like, that was predictable. We figured that out the first time that you brought this up, that it was going to be like that. And it's still, I can't remember if it actually comes out and says that like Stevens framed Shepard with a lot of that stuff. I can't remember if they come right out and say it, but it is heavily implied. And it was heavily implied the first time around. We got it. Why are you going back? I think they went back to that whole event 5 times. Maybe it was 4. But it was like, why do you keep going back to... And then there was the polar bear scene they kind of kept going back to, except the first few times was pretty vague, or it was just kind of like partial, I guess. And then the last time, the whole story was revealed. And it goes along with, Day keeps thinking about when Stevens asked him what's the worst thing he ever done, and it's revealed that it was when Stevens told him when the polar bear came out to let the weakest and the sickest ones die. The ones that can barely even walk or can't walk because they're still traveling from their ship to some place to camp out, and they'd be able to move a lot quicker if they did that. And they even Stevens even pretends to try to get a shot on the polar bear, and then just lets the polar bear kill all those weak ones and then leave. It's like, okay, for one thing, I get that. And also, Day saying that's the worst thing ever. Honestly, I've heard worse from real life survival situations, and those worst things, when they've come back, people are like, that makes sense. You had to do what you had to do to survive. It sucks, yes. But at the same time, those people were so sick, it was clear that they weren't going to live anyway. And that was another reason why Stevens was saying that, too. He's like, they're slowing us down, and they're not even going to make it anyway. And yeah, he was a shitty guy. It's pretty well revealed throughout the entire thing that he was a shitty guy. But, in that instance, that's not really actually the worst thing. It sucks for those, like I said, it sucks for those people, but they're gonna die anyway. And, everybody else on the crew apparently did not want to admit it, you know what I mean? And that's why Stevens pretended to get a shot on the polar bear. But that's another part that doesn't make sense, is that, okay, but wouldn't you at least, once it killed that last person of the week, then shoot the polar bear, be like, oh, I finally got a shot. Then you have food. But instead he just lets the polar bear go. It's like, and Dave thinks that's the worst thing he ever did, but it wasn't even really his plan. Yeah, he was the one that could do the orders because he was the captain, but, he went along with everything Stevens did because he was in love with Stevens and didn't want to do anything for himself, really. When that was the big reveal of that, and I'm like, really? That's the worst thing that you could think of for Day to have done. In my opinion, the potential of Shepard being framed when apparently he was actually a really good hunter and he was really good at keeping all the men's spirits up. Framing him for thievery and stocking up on ammunition like he's going to leave. That's worse than that. Because at least he is fully able-bodied. Again, it's not really... It's kind of uncertain whether or not that actually did happen, but the fact that Stevens had said a few times that, like, oh, Shepard's becoming a problem for us, you know, we should probably get rid of him. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. There's just so many times the author seems to think that something is so much more worse or more sinister than what it actually is. And then going to what I said about Stevens' wife being a psychic medium, it turns out she's a fake, right? That in itself is like, okay, so then what's the fucking point of making her a psychic medium? But even before that, what was the point? Because you think with them introducing her as that, they'd utilize that in some form or fashion. There's a few scenes where they do a seance. For the most part, all the seances are quick scenes, and they don't really actually add anything to the plot. One of them, some stuff kind of happens, but also not really. You know what I mean? Like, ultimately, if you took that out of the book, if you took that scene out of the book and you took out all the other seance scenes out of the book, and frankly, if you took Stevens' wife out of the book, it would not change the story at all. So why is she in there? Why is she supposed to be a psychic medium, and why did you bring that whole thing up? Why did you add in those things? Like, it does not add anything to the story. There's no substance behind it. It barely even does anything with the atmosphere of it. It just is useless. I don't get it. And I just think it's one of those... Another one of the things that the author added in there to try to get you to think that maybe there's something supernatural going on, just to be like, oh yeah, she was a fake. Okay, so why did she want to come on the expedition? Because even at one point on the expedition, she's like, why are we even saving my husband? He was a pretty bad person. I want to leave him anyway. I don't know. Why the fuck are we trying to... Day, even from the beginning, is keeps on going back and forth between... wanting to find him and you know, be with him and stuff like that, and then like, oh, we should probably just leave him there because he's so far gone. He's a fucking monster. He's done so many things and he's made me do so many bad things. You know, you didn't have to go on the expedition, bro. When the guy asked you to lead it because Stevens' wife wanted you to do it, could have been like, you know, nah. And he would have been like, well, shit, okay. Also, Stevens' wife didn't have to make the expedition happen because apparently she doesn't even want him back anyway. Why are we going on this expedition to find him? I get that the point of it is so that we go and find Stevens again. The author needed to find some way for us to get back to that place for some weird reason. And instead of just making it so... It could have just been the original expedition and then just Day's been with Stevens the whole time. Or they end up getting separated, but they're both stranded there, and then they meet up again, and then he sees what Stevens has done without him. Would have achieved the same fucking destination that the current book has. But I get that you wanted them to come back, and then you wanted them to get a new crew and go back. Okay, I get that. So then why are you making all the characters go back and forth between like, oh yeah, we're going to go find him, to, this guy's a piece of shit, I fucking hate him, nobody likes him. I don't get that. What's the point of that? Trying to put in melodrama for no reason? Is that it? Like, I don't know. And then there's also the doctor on the expedition that was on the original expedition. He keeps on telling Day that, like, you know, we should just turn around and go away. I fucking hate that guy. He's horrible. Again, yeah, Day was like, yeah, I want him to be on my crew as the doctor, and asked the doctor if he'd want to go back. The doctor could have just been like, fuck no. I'm like in my 50s, bro. I'm not going back out there. And I feel like Day would have been like, I'm bummed, but understandable, right? If it, assuming that Day's sane enough to see that. But instead, he just, oh yeah, I'll go with you guys just because you asked me to. Like, and for the longest time in the book, I think for about half of the book, I was under the impression that they went back on this expedition like right after they got back, like they, got together a crew and supplies. But it's like 13 years after they got back from the original expedition, so it's like, if this book was realistic, he's dead. Don't even bother going back there. There's nothing out there for him to eat, and there's nobody to find, or whatever like that, right? But since this book is unrealistic, he is apparently still alive, and when they go back there, even though the 3 years that they were stranded there, they never found any natives, sort of like that, after they go back there, and then they move away from the ship, and like within like weeks, I think it's like a few weeks, they end up finding Stevens. And not only did he find some natives, but he also found a bunch of white people to basically create a town with in the middle of that Arctic wilderness. Where did these white people come from? Like, yeah, where did the native people come from? But that's a little bit more believable. It's a little bit easier to accept, even though they never found anybody like that in the first expedition after 3 years. But within weeks, just a few weeks of travel, there apparently was these fucking natives. I don't know. But again, where did the white people come from? Like, I don't get that. And it explicitly states that a lot of them are white, right? Like, Dave's just like, oh wow, that's weird. Like, that wasn't a native. I could tell by his skin tone. Like, that was very pale white. Where did they come from? Did fucking Stevens just conjure them up out of nowhere? Just like, I want a man. Like, I don't get it. I don't. That pissed me off, honestly. When that was revealed, I was just like, so I went through all of this thinking that maybe the ending would redeem itself and you're just going to turn around and do the plot twist from This Is the End. The Seth Rogen movie that's supposed to be a comedy and supposed to be ridiculous. When Danny McBride left the fucking house and all of a sudden it's not even really a plot twist of that movie, but you know what I mean. But like, Danny McBride leaves the house and then within like 5 minutes he's basically a cannibal king. And has Channing Tatum as like a sex slave. You do that in this horror movie that's supposed to be horror book that's supposed to be a serious novel. It was done better, and This Is the End. Oh my gosh. And then Day decides that, we'll burn all these buildings down they created with all the people in it, except for Stevens. I'll bring him back to the boat and keep him contained so I can bring him back. Why would you kill all those other people but then spare Stevens? And even, like, Stevens' wife is kind of like, why didn't you just kill him? I don't fucking get it. The ending pissed me off so bad, and the ending made no sense and made everything else make even less sense. What was the point of anything? And even though some scenes were very well written and were genuinely entertaining, up until that point when we found out that he became the Danny McBride Cannibal King from This Is the End, I was actually like, I might be willing to give this like a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Because, first half of the book, when I really wasn't thinking about the plot, I was actually enjoying it until I really thought about some of those things. Like, why are we going back after 13 years? Why are we going after him when nobody likes him? Like, all these other things like that. So, I mean, there was a while in the book that I actually was genuinely enjoying it. So it's like, had the potential of being like anywhere between 2 to 3 stars out of 5. If the ending was good enough, it could have been 3 stars. Where I liked it. There was a lot of stuff that you kind of really got to suspend a lot of disbelief for, but if the ending was worth it, boom, it could have been. But with the ending so fucking bad, it's like, no, it's not even okay. Like, It's 1.5 out of 5 stars is what I gave it, and that's actually being kind of generous with the more I think about it, the more it's like that should maybe be a 1. But like I said, there's some great writing in it. Apparently, the book that Allie Wilkes wrote before this was All the White Spaces, and from what I've heard, it's the exact same book. Like, people that have read both books said, yeah, she wrote the same book twice in a row, and it was worse the second time around. So apparently All the White Spaces is better. I have no interest in seeing, though, for myself. It was just so disappointing. Like, if I had picked up on a lot of the flaws before I did, I might have actually just DNF'd this book, honestly. You get to a point, if you're like more than halfway through it, or even like 70% of the way through it, and you're starting to, that's when you're really starting to be like, I don't know. At least for me, I usually will end up powering through it. If I'm feeling that at the halfway mark or before, yeah, I'll usually just DNF it, right? But halfway through, I was starting to get some doubts, right? But it was kind of like, it might still be good. Maybe it's just right now, there's a little bit lull in the middle. It wasn't until around 70% that I'm like, really like, I don't even care. But let's see where it leads us, just in case, because I'm already this far. It's unfair, to an extent, to talk about like how you should just read The Terror, because The Terror is the concept of a Arctic expedition horror, just done so much better, and with a lot better survival aspects, a lot more unpredictability, and so much more like just better written characters, better written everything, and it is unfair to an extent to be like, well, this was done so much better, you should just read this one, because it's not like just because one type of thing is good doesn't mean that you shouldn't read any of the others. Vampire, there's a lot of vampire books and movies out there, but just because one's better than the rest doesn't mean that you shouldn't watch or read the rest of them, right? Or any of the other ones. But in this case, it's like, not only is The Terror just the more superior one, but it also feels like this book, Where the Dead Wait, is trying to steal a lot of the story beats, because the order of events feels very similar. Just Where the Dead Wait is a lot shorter of a book. It's almost like if Allie Wilkes was trying to condense The Terror into a 300-page book, 300-some-page book, where we even get like some of the same things that make it different. I don't know. Both books have a native woman on the ship, but in The Terror, she doesn't start off on the ship. They find her because she's on a floating polar ice cap with her dying husband or something like that, and they save her so that she doesn't die, and that's how she goes on the ship, right? But in Where the Dead Wait, she actually gets on the boat from the beginning. She's not a guide. She's not really part of the crew or anything like that. It's like, why the fuck is she on here? It is said later on in the book, from Stevens' wife, she says something like, Stevens always kept telling me to find him women. I'm assuming for sex purposes. I don't know. But it sounds like Stevens is more batting for his own team with Day, you know what I mean? So that kind of is a little bit weird. Obviously, he could be bisexual, but the way that she writes him in the book, especially by the end, it's like, it doesn't sound like he's interested in women at all, so maybe he was before and now he isn't. I don't know. But it's also still just like, okay, but Stevens' wife was also basically saying that she doesn't like him and wants to leave him at some point on the journey there, right? Okay, so then why would you go so far as to bring him a woman? Because that's his wishes. That doesn't make sense. I feel like Allie Wilkes just felt like she needed to put a native woman on the boat because The Terror had it. Or something like that. I don't know. Maybe it was unintentional, but there were just so many things that really felt like it was trying to be ripped straight from The Terror. And for that reason, and also the fact that Where the Dead Wait, even within its own thing, like even if you never read The Terror, it's still not a good book, especially with the shitty ending. Because of that, that's why I'm like, just read The Terror. It's not because, oh, The Terror is the only Arctic survival horror book that can ever exist. I haven't found any others, really. Like, I'm not even saying I haven't found any others that I've liked. I really have not looked into that genre as a whole, but I can tell you, out of these two, the only one that's worth reading is The Terror. Because I said that in my other video where I was talking about this book, about how you should just read The Terror and not this one. So I just want that to be clear. I'm not saying that because I'm like The Terror elitist. It's literally just because this book is terrible. And if you want a book that's like this, that's the only other option I know of. Yes, if you have read The Terror and you really are jonesing for another book of that type, you know, I can see why you might be like, well, I'm going to read it anyway, but I really just don't. I mean, you probably wouldn't even anyway if you're watching this video, because I just spoiled like everything that happens in it. Like I said I was going to, but I don't know. This isn't even this isn't an Arctic expedition, and I haven't read it yet, but I've heard really good things about this. Drowning, the rescue flight something. Doesn't give me the... the Rescue of Flight 1421. This sounds like it's a lot better. This is a survival horror book. Maybe try that one out instead. I don't know. I've also heard of another... well, it's not survival horror, but another survival type book is that I've heard of that I really want to read is The Wager, which is another non-fiction. Well, The Drowning isn't a non-fiction, but it's a non-fiction book, and it's written by the same guy that did Flowers of the Killer Moon. And I think they get shipwrecked on Brazil or something like that instead of like an Arctic place. But that sounds like a better survival story than Where the Dead Wait. And going along with non-fiction, this is also not horror. Obviously, it's non-fiction, but it is Arctic, and I can't remember if I talked about it earlier in this video, but I did talk about it in the other video. But Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by Alfred Lansing, is really good. I really need to revisit this. I read it, the physical copy, when I was in school once, so that's how I've read it before. But I do have this audiobook version that I'd like to try out. And I would rather have just reread this than have read Where the Dead Wait. Now, I'm not trying to be mean to the author or anything like that, and I'm sure that she spent a lot of time and effort and hard work writing that book, and she is talented. You know, she does write really good scenes and descriptions. It's just such a mess. And why couldn't she have just come up with an ending that made sense? Like, I don't get it. Well, even going back to that Native woman thing, is that another reason why of why is this Native woman on the ship? Because her character does not serve anything other than to be continually the damsel in distress. There's so many situations where like she's like held at knife point, or she's being threatened in some kind of way for no fucking reason, but I guess because she's a woman. But like, nobody's gonna do that to Stevens' wife, I guess. Maybe it's like because she's Native and not white, I don't know. But parts of the story where it doesn't really make sense for her to be threatened, like, you know, somebody like pulling a mutiny and then like, oh, I'll kill this random girl, like, I don't know. Like, how does the fucking mutiny guy know that Day's actually gonna care about her? I mean, he does happen to, but like, it's one of the, I don't know. She just feels like she's put there just to be the damsel in distress in a bunch of situations, which doesn't make sense further, because later on she ends up actually being the exact opposite, where like, you know, she's actually helping Day. You know, she's got a knife on her person at all times. almost like Allie Wilkes couldn't make up her mind if she wanted the native woman. I keep saying native woman because I don't remember what her name was. It's almost like she couldn't make up her mind if she wanted her to continually be the damsel in distress, or if she wanted to have her be a badass or something like that. So she just kind of kept throwing her back and forth. I don't know. There's also the whole thing with the guy with the orca mask. It's like, orcas, killer whales, they're like pretty big, right? Wouldn't their fucking heads be like, see, you can't even see my hands in the shot because that's how big the whale's head would be at least, and yet this person's wearing the mask, wearing the head of an orca on his head. You wouldn't be able to fucking maneuver, dude. What? And yet you're able to like pull off like ninja assassin moves. I don't know if Allie Wilkes knows anything about orcas. Oh, maybe it's a baby orca. I don't know. It doesn't make sense either. Now, when there's a guy that has a polar bear mask, that makes sense. But that's my rant on Where the Dead Wait by Allie Wilkes. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with... if you've read the book, do you agree with what I've said? Or are there things that I've said that you're like, no, you don't make sense? Let me know in the comments below. Let's have a discussion if you liked the book. That is the cool part, too, about different people reading the same book, is that other people will have different insights. Maybe you thought that a lot of stuff you could suspend disbelief for. Let me know. You know what I mean? I would like to hear other people's opinions about the book, because maybe there are some stuff that I missed, or some stuff that I'm either overthinking or underthinking. I'm definitely not gonna, if you're gonna argue about it, I'm just gonna ignore that. But if you want to have like a nice discussion about it, I'll definitely. I'm not here to say that you have to hate this book, I guess. This is just my opinion. This is how I thought. This is what I got from it. This is my disappointment. Hope you're reading a better book than I read.